Blake, what's the furthest you've ever run without dying?
There was this billboard across a farmer's cornfield in high school, and you know what? Never mind.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who ran through a cornfield full of thorn bushes to touch an interstate billboard in high school because Smyrna is that boring. And I'm here with my co-host, who is way too intelligent to run through a cornfield that is full of thorns, Toby Walters.
I like how you were about to say, you were going to have me say, I'm your host, Blake Hodges, because you just pointed to me.
I did. I messed up.
I know.
Right at the start.
How embarrassing for you, Blake. It's almost like you've never done a podcast before in your life.
You know, it'd be even more embarrassing if you'd introduced yourself as Blake Hodges.
That'd be funny. I'm your host, Blake Hodges, and I am 29 years old and know nothing about anything in history.
I'm your other host, Toby Walters, who was eating a Nutty Buddy with one hand and playing Candy Crush with the other right before we hit record. That's a true story.
It'd be sad if it wasn't true. Okay, Blake, speaking of Nutty Buddies, I used to be a runner. And when I say used to, I mean literally when I was 10 years old, I was a runner.
Okay.
And I was at my elementary school, there was they called it the running program. And in every grade, 3rd through 5th, there was a specific class that was part of the running program. So every morning on weekdays, we would go out and we would run about 3 miles.
Nice.
And our slogan was, "It's funner to be a runner."
Sure.
I feel like, yeah, that's a real stretch. But
well, the stretching's what you do before.
Since leaving, now, of course, you have to run in PE sometimes in middle school and high school. But otherwise, since then, I've run on purpose once in my life. I remember once in college, I was like, I really should probably get some exercise. Maybe I'll go for a run. And I went for a run for like a mile, and I almost died.
For real?
No, okay. Not for real.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you could have. Maybe you got hit by a chimichanga in the face.
But, you know, as church gear has grown, like I used to sling gear out of my basement is kind of how we would say it. And I'd be moving gear, packing gear all day, every day. But now as the company's growing, like I sit on my butt in meetings and in podcasts. I'm sitting on my butt right now and I just ate a Nutty Buddy.
Trying to kill you slowly.
I know. So I joined the gym about a year ago and my wife and I got a membership and she goes all the time. And I go every once in a while.
That's a great use of money.
But, you know, I'm making an effort. Yeah. Are you making any efforts in getting healthy, Blake?
So, Toby, I recently got suckered into doing a 5K, and if someone asks you to do a 5K with them, that's because they hate you.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It's the worst. So I show up to this 5K with my wife and her coworkers and her friends, and it's 7 a.m. in Nashville, and right as we start to run, it's like 45 degrees, it starts to pour rain. Pouring rain. I am so instantly cold that I hit fight or flight. Someone in our group goes, "Should we actually run this instead of walk?" And I take off running because I'm now trying to survive. You know how my survival senses are.
And is this like Napoleon Dynamite running?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because in my head, I'm like, I'm going to sprint through this and be done with it. And when I saw the first mile marker, I was very disappointed that I knew I had 3 miles total. Well, I make it to like a mile and a half and I finally stopped because I'd stayed up till midnight the night before this, hanging out with Jeremy. And when I left his house, I was like, you know what sounds really good? Some McDonald's.
Oh my gosh.
So I stayed up to midnight, had McDonald's, woke up at 5 a.m., did a 5K in the rain. It was awful. My body is still sore from that. We're recording on a Wednesday, and that happened on a Saturday.
It's like the episode of The Office where they ran the 5K, and Michael Scott ate the Alfredo chicken before because he was going to carb load.
That's exactly what happened, and it was awful. It was so awful, Tobes.
And yet you live to tell about it. Here you are still.
So straight up, I was telling someone about this, and they were like, why on earth did you eat McDonald's the night before? And I remember driving thinking, well, this will be funny for the podcast, even if it's the worst.
Even if you won't be alive to tell the story because you ate McDonald's and then did a 5K.
If you laughed hearing this, please reach out to me to let me know that it wasn't in vain. So it wasn't that great, but I'll tell you someone that is great. The video director or the director of video production at Transformation Church, Chad Vegas. Chad, welcome to the show, man.
What's up, guys? Great to be here. Good to be here.
Chad, are you intelligent enough not to eat McDonald's the midnight before a morning 5K?
Yeah. No, I've been there before. I've actually eaten at midnight before going to work out at 5 a.m. So it wasn't.
Did you throw that food up?
Almost. Yeah. That's funny.
Oh,
That's
goodness.
too funny.
All right.
Well, I see in his 5 Truths and a Lie that there is an eating one. So
here we go.
yeah, here we go.
All right. 5 Truths and a Lie. I'll introduce this segment. Why not? We're going to say a couple of things that Chad has sent us. He sent us a bunch of truths and one lie. We're going to try to guess it.
But I'm only counting 5 total. So either Chad can't count or there is no lie.
He might be too honest.
Yeah. Let's find out.
Number 1. Started playing drums at 7 years old. Became a session drummer by the time I was 10. So by the time Toby was doing his running in PE class, he was a
session drummer. Yep.
Number 2, was once a contestant on Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
You know what that is, right, Blake?
I don't.
Are you serious?
I've done
4th of July? Like every year, the Nathan's hot dog eating contest?
The Nathan that I know is the guy that works at Church Gear. I don't know another Nathan.
It's like a huge thing. It featured on ESPN every year. It's Kobayashi versus Joey Chestnut. Like, you don't know about this?
I'm about to waste a lot of work hours YouTubing this.
Gosh.
Number 3, have lived through 2 hurricanes. I'm only counting that if he lived like on the coast.
I mean, I've lived 43 years and countless hurricanes have happened during that time, but I haven't, I guess he's saying that he was like in the hurricane, so to speak.
He was probably with a kite or a parachute.
Like he didn't run away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 4, did not dream of becoming a live video and film director.
Okay.
Number 5, grew up on a cemetery.
At least he didn't say in a cemetery, I guess, or under a cemetery.
Yeah, get busy growing up or get busy dying. I mean, goodness gracious. I don't know.
And Blake, I want to ask you, so this hot dog eating contest happens every year on 4th of July. I think they have 10 minutes to eat as many hot dogs as they can. The world record holder is named Joey Chestnut. He's been the record for like the last 10 years in a row. How many hot dogs did he eat in 10 minutes?
Well, his last name shouldn't be Chestnut. It should be Hot Dog. I'm going to say in 10 minutes, I'm going to say he ate 67.
Okay, you're not too far off. I don't know if you know, Chad, but I think it's somewhere around 75 or 80.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that
is amazing.
That's only about half the amount that one of my cousins eats every Thanksgiving.
Oh my God.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know what to put. I'm going to say I don't know. What are you going to pick, Tobes?
I'm going to pick the hurricanes. I'm going to say he has not lived through 2 hurricanes. I'm going to say it's
hurricanes?
who hurricanes? I'm going to say he actually lived through a lot more.
Okay. I'm going to say the drummer one.
Okay.
All right. We're locked in, Chad.
All right. The lie, I've never been a part of a hot dog eating contest.
Oh, come
never,
on.
Ever.
Dang it.
Yeah. All the rest were true. I grew up on a cemetery.
What does that mean?
My dad was a general. He was a general manager for a funeral home, and so every day after school, I'd be there at work. Yep, and just hanging out with him, doing my homework next to a grave. I'm just kidding. That part's okay. But yeah, I'd be there, just hanging out, and then he all the way until I was about 16 years old. We were selling burial and funeral plots. So I actually, by the time I was 15, was selling burial and funeral plots, which is funny. But yeah.
Can you get one prepped for Blake? Because this McDonald's and 5K decision is going to put him in the ground.
Oh, man.
Guys, no lie. I had such bad pneumonia preemptive feelings that I went to Kroger and I bought a whole pack of like vitamin C gummies, and I've still been mainlining them every day since. Because I felt awful. I then had to host a Star Wars birthday party that night for my wife's best friend. It was a bad day. Did you ever see any ghosts on that cemetery?
No, I didn't. There was some. I didn't see any, but there's just weird things that happens at night sometimes there.
What was the weirdest thing that happened? Do you have anything?
Weirdest thing that happened was more so like people coming and vandalizing, trying to break in, grave diggers, right? So there's been some grave digging that there still exists. I think it is, I guess, a lucrative business. So there was there was a gypsy funeral that happened, and they want to send their dead off with into the afterlife with money. So they'll literally throw like $10,000 to $20,000 in the casket as it's going down. It's really morbid. This conversation is taking a turn, guys.
Yeah. And Blake, we're in the wrong business apparently.
I was gonna joke that we moonlight as grave diggers, but like, man,
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Okay, so this seems like too low hanging a fruit, but you dreamed of becoming a live video and film director, and obviously we'll get into that. But tell us about living through two hurricanes, because Blake and I never have.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I'm originally from Hawaii. So born and raised up until I was 16 years old. And then we moved to Las Vegas. But before that, when I was 3 years old, there was a hurricane that hit the island. So I lived through that one. And then when I was 12 years old, another major hurricane came through and ripped through the island. And we used to live about 4.5 miles up into a mountain area. And we figured, yeah, it's going to be safer here. And I mean, our house was built fairly well. So we're like, we'll just ride it out. So we rode out the hurricane underneath the stairwell of our house. And the top half after that was completely gone. But we survived. Yeah.
So I'm guessing that was a scary and memorable moment.
Yeah, it was. It's the weirdest thing when people talk about the eye of the hurricane. It is the weirdest thing because it's all this heavy wind, rain. You hear all the sounds, and then complete silence, and then the sun comes through the eye of the hurricane.
Wow. So
we took that time. We knew that from what they were telling us, like it takes 30 minutes for the eye to pass. So just if you have to do anything or flee for more safety, you got 30 minutes, So luckily our house was well built enough. Foundation was good enough that we actually, it wasn't so bad. So,
speaking of running, what if you could just run the hurricane? Like you just run in the eye of the hurricane whole time to survive?
Just run.
I'm sure that's
survive.
a thing, Blake.
Oh my goodness. Well, Chad, man, we're so happy to have you on. You were on our initial list of dream podcast guests. When I went to reach out to you on Instagram a while ago, because I'll stalk the guests, a little behind the scenes here, see what they're up to, start liking their posts. Maybe they'll notice, maybe they'll be ready whenever I reach out to them. And when I go to do that for you, I was like, Chad's going through it right now. Like you were kind of going through a health battle. So tell us about your health journey and how that's affected you and your role in production.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think the one of the biggest things. So for those of you listening that don't really know what happened to me, I got pneumonia, and 3 weeks later, I ended up getting COVID. And that first initial days of COVID was, it's just common cold. It's kind of just I can manage this. I can deal with this. Was taking all the antibiotics, all the stuff that was the doctors were giving me at the time. And then the day after Christmas, December 26th, I could barely breathe. And so I turned around to my wife and said, I think I need to go to the hospital. And so we went to the hospital or emergency room and was subsequently hospitalized for about a whole week. And long story short, got released, still on full-time oxygen, could barely move. Almost pretty much wheelchair every time I had to leave or do stuff, And then 3 weeks later, I relapsed and got sick again. And then got hospitalized again for a second time. And all through that, have an incredible team that basically ran everything for me. And through that time, I was just, I got to get better. I need to get health, get better so I can get back to work. Even if I'm not fully 100%, at least I can get back in. And a lot of it was for me as a man needing, I need to provide for my family. How am I supposed to provide for my family if I'm not working, and all that stuff. And basically, somebody who's a mentor of mine, I call him my spiritual father. He flew down and he's like, hey, I don't feel like you're supposed to be going back to work. Because I tried twice. I tried to go into the office and I could barely make it half the day, and it it was just dealing with symptoms of long COVID is what they call it. So I was still on oxygen. I could move a little bit, and uh, right as he was coming down, I was starting to get worse again. It was like, man, I don't want to go into the hospital again. So basically said, hey, why don't you come up to a farm of mine in Washington State, get rest, get healing for however long it's going to take. And my wife and I just felt like it was God, and so we basically I sat down with our leadership at the church, and I said, hey, I want to come back to work. TC is my home. This is where God has put us. However, my health isn't good right now. Like I can barely walk. I can, it would take me sometimes 10 minutes just to get 6 feet. And I basically just told him, I said, I need to take a leave of absence. And my biggest fear is not having a job when I come back. And I'll never forget that day, because Pastor Charles basically looks at me and he goes, Chad, we wouldn't be Transformation. And he stopped. He goes, no, we wouldn't be the church if we didn't put your health and priorities first. And he said, however long it's going to take that time to get better. And it was a really good release. Like I even felt this spiritual release to be like, okay, I can really focus on just me getting healed, getting healing and all that stuff. And kind of fast forward, we end up basically moving to Washington State for a few months. And within that time, I was radically healed. And God just like it basically went from not being able to walk on full-time oxygen to almost 48 hours after getting radically healed. I was pulling my son on a go-kart on still trying to get my breaths in, but I didn't need oxygen anymore. My pulse oximeter was reading 98, 99. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Since then, that journey kind of led me onto a whole emotional health journey. And what I realized and recognized through all of this was that I was actually pushing myself so much, one, for the sake of the call, right? Like, oh, this is the ministry. I'm doing this all for the sake of the call. And two, if I worked hard, I was under the mindset that if I worked hard enough, that my pastor could rest. They could have it easy. But here I am killing myself just trying to do, sometimes 60 hours a week, and they wouldn't even put that on me. It's me putting that on myself of, man, I gotta perform. I gotta do all this stuff. And so the journey of that, coming back 8 months. So by the time I got back to actually being back on staff at TC, it was 8 months. I was gone for 8 months. And within that 8 months was just a journey of really finding myself again, finding whose I was again, and getting to a point where it's really, really not about anything performance wise. Like I dealt with this huge rejection issue that I thought I dealt with years ago, but it was still there was still some roots in there. And you'll never get rid of rejection per se, but I did find new tools on how to combat that. So that way, if, I text someone, Pastor Mike, if I text him and he doesn't text me back, in the past, it'd be, oh, did I do something wrong? Am I going to get fired? And my mind just, spirals to now it's like, oh yeah, he's probably just busy, So that whole, just kind of summarize, it's a long story, but to summarize it all, for me, I feel like getting sick was actually very, very good for me in the fact that it brought me back to a sense of whose I really was and how much the Father loves me. And then also it brought me back to really putting my family first above all things. I would come home, get back right at work because I got to get something done for the next day, right? I would barely have enough time, feeling like I would barely have enough time for my family because I always got to work, but then realizing, oh, that was just me doing that, So I learned how to basically put boundaries on, get good boundaries. When I'm home now, I even have a separate line now that if there's any emergencies or anything, say for whatever reason, Pastor Mike's like, I want to get up at sunrise and we want to film something during, on sunrise. They know, my team knows to call that technically like an emergency number, because they know as soon as I hit my driveway, my phone goes off and it's family time. That's it. And it's taken me, it's still a journey, right? So it's not like it happens every time. There's still times when my wife's like, "Hey, come back to me, my love. I'm right here." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right. I'm texting. I'm doing work stuff."
Yeah, that's
So
amazing.
kind of just to, summarize that. It's really just, I learned how to know how much the Father loves me and that I don't have to truly perform for anybody
Mm.
because He's already impressed with me. And yeah.
I mean, first of all, we're glad you're still with us, Chad.
Yeah.
That sounds like it was a scary moment, and I'm sure for your family, just going through that. But watching your journey, I love seeing your journey on social media over the last year or so, and seeing that how serious you've taken your health, and how have you been able to then, because I mean, techs historically just haven't put their health first. Both physical and mental. They're, sitting, focusing on projects all day, and they're working 60, 80, 90 hours a week sometimes to make visions happen. So how are you encouraging other techs to put their health first and take it seriously?
Yeah. I think it comes down to, you have to realize that you and your family matters above all else. And whether that's like, if you're married, obviously your wife, if you got kids, your family, but even if you're single, like you come first. Like, get to a spot, have the difficult conversations with your leaders about, "Hey, I need time off. I need this." Now, obviously in a compassionate and healthy way, right? You don't want to just barge in and be like, "Hey, you're overworking me. What's wrong with you guys? I need,
I
time
do that
off,
every
all this
Thursday
stuff."
to Toby, so he's kind of used to that.
That's
You
great.
don't work on Thursdays,
Yeah.
Blake, do you?
Yeah, but totally, just be okay with having that difficult conversation, because at the end of the day, whether you succeed in the vision being pushed, or doing something crazy that's revolutionary with your church, all this stuff, at the end of the day, who are you coming home to? You're coming home to your family. You're coming home to yourself, your wife, and you got to sit with that, right? And if what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his family, right? Lose himself, lose his family, lose his, So it's one of those things, is prioritizing, making it a full. I'll say this, I would always go into, "Hey, I can rest, when I'm done with this, or I can rest when I'm done with that." But then the next project rolls around, right? The next thing comes on. And then slowly but surely, I'm distancing myself from my family because I got to get this done and all this stuff. And I would always go into that of, I'm okay. I'm going to rest someday, or soon. I'll make sure that I take time, 2 or 3 days off, from this. But then I've been working for 6 months straight almost, right? It's like, is that enough? Right. So really getting to that point where it's making sure that you have good boundaries, making sure that you are actually pursuing really oneness with your family, and doing activities with them. Especially for me, it's like prayer and worship. I'll go to the gym at 5 a.m. now in the morning, come back home, and we'll pray as a family. We'll worship as a family for about a half an hour, and then I go to work. But we're doing that because we realize that actually keeps, like for me and my wife, it keeps us really tied together, to a point where even when it does get hectic, that, because especially where I'm at, we have crazy seasons where it's like boom, 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 we're hitting it hard all this time. Like this past 2 weeks with relaunching launching our control room. I was in the trainings basically for 2 weeks straight without a day off. We had, or maybe one day off. And because of that, though, because we were connecting still in the morning, it was something that we found for us that worked, that if I'm connecting with her in the morning, I'm with my son in the morning, then it kind of gives kind of that buffer, right? Before it was, I'm just gonna go to sleep. I'm tired. Wake up. Okay, I gotta go back to work. Love you guys. I'll see you guys when I'm back. Um, so I think what I'm really trying to say is like getting those boundaries, making sure that you guys put yourselves first. Like I can't even emphasize that enough. Like everything I do now is it sounds selfish. I know everything I do is for me and my family, right? And it's because I know the flip side of that, where I was overworking myself so much that I was unhealthy. I think by the time I reached, by the time I came to transformation to the time I got sick, I think I gained like 80 pounds. And so getting to that point, but for me, it's like, oh, it's nothing, it's just, oh, stress eating, all this, just joking around about it. But it's actually true. Like, it still happens. I catch myself sometimes wanting to go to McDonald's again, because I was like,
Don't do what
man,
Blake
I'm
does.
tired. Yeah, exactly. But just getting to that spot where I was so unhealthy, and even the way I thought was unhealthy in a sense that I have to push myself for the ministry. Like I have to do this. And there are healthy aspects. Like, yes, there are moments when you're going to have to put in the hard work. You're going to have to push. But then, we all know it, right? Christmas season, Easter, things like that. But for the most part, it's making sure that you're just thinking about, okay, taking an assessment. Like I do it every day now. It's like, for me, that's what the workouts have become. That's why I was challenged one day from a life coach of mine. And he's like, why don't you just get up at 5 a.m. and go work out? Try that for a week. And I really never stopped. So it's something for me that's like my time. That's another thing. That's my time, my personal time with God. That's my personal time with myself. I can do things, reflect, listen to podcasts, do all this stuff while I'm working out. That has kind of helped me kind of even with my emotional health and things, different podcasts and stuff like that. So yeah, the long answer, right? But I think it just comes down to don't wait like I did until I was actually hospitalized twice and had to take 8 months off of work before before I actually like realized, like, oh yeah, I need to work on my mental health. I need to work on my physical health.
Totally.
And I love, Chad, hearing it from you. Because somebody could judge what you're saying and say, oh, that's easy for him. He's at a small church with a single camera shoot and not much going on. But as we've seen, I've never been to Transformation. I know Dave Roediger got the pleasure of visiting you guys just a few weeks ago. But as I've seen online, and I could probably show Blake the Super Bowl halftime show if he hadn't seen it, and then Transformation Church, and then asked him like, which one's Transformation, which one's the Super Bowl halftime show.
We were watching some clips on YouTube of y'all's church, and I was
mackerel.
like, this is crazy. When we're gonna fly to their church for Christmas, right? For research, for work, right?
So talk to us about like, man, what does it take to put together those productions that you guys are doing? Those are incredible.
Especially now in a healthy way.
Right, yeah. So the beauty about how we do things here is, and it kind of goes back to like what Pastor Charles said when I asked for time off, right? It's a very unique staff situation because they put us completely first. In a sense that if we're in the middle of it, even when we're like in the thick of it, if there's a day where we're like, hey, I just need to be with my family. Okay, go ahead, cool. But the way we run it here, because we're in an arena situation. We run things like a tour. So we're constantly looking at, just next week we're going into a set change. So we'll be redesigning our whole stage. And because we're in an arena, it's a whole tour setup. You're hanging your PA, you got all of your LED stuff going on. And that's because we're at a place where we do value production, like we value high production, just not because of any like, hey, this is what we're doing. Yeah, look at us, But really, it's because we found that there is it's a way of reaching the lost that we never even thought of, that Pastor Mike didn't even think of. We were at a staff meeting this morning, and he was talking about that, about like God has given us this internet platform on YouTube that he never even thought would ever, like, how, we're seeing 30 to 50,000 people actively watching on a Sunday service. Out of that, just some numbers is we're actually seeing like a retention rate of almost 20 to 30 minutes.
What?
So it's incredible. Like, yeah, it's crazy. Like we don't, it's God. That's all I can say, And a lot of it is, so that's why he wants to put a high production value and stuff. This is why we started this weekend with doing 4K HDR. A lot of it is because this is a new tool for us to actually reach the lost. And because of that, we're seeing thousands it's giving their life to Christ. There's people that like, hey, I would have never even thought about a church or going to a church until I actually saw you guys online. Things like that. But yeah, it's definitely those seasons of like I said, next week we're going into a set change, and it's going to be a really cool set. I'll show you guys offline. But it's going to be a cool set, and all that hard work we put in the hours, but at the same time we do value family and yourself first. So a lot of it is just, as long as we're communicating, I think that's the biggest thing, that even in church production, we don't communicate. we take it all in and be like, yeah, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do that. And then after a while, like your list just grows, and then you're not actually communicating like, hey, this is too much. I need help here. Can we get somebody to help? The beauty I love too about what we're trying to do here is a lot of times, and it completely changed my mind on how things are done. So most people know I came from Bethel, and all of my cam ops at Bethel were actually staff. And because we had a high production value there as well, and tons of different shoots happening throughout the week, cut to here, everything's aside from two, I'd say one now, one other person that helps me with video, everybody's volunteered. So throughout the week, if we have shoots or anything, I actually lean on the other staff members, and it gives them an opportunity for them to come in and kind of experience production and kind of see like, oh, this is what you guys do. So it's kind of a cool thing, where I can actually just reach out and not overwork the rest of the production staff, or have them, hey, I have to go and set up this LED wall, but then I got to come back for this shoot. I can actually ask somebody from the ministries department, hey, you wanna hop on camera?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so that's how we're very unique in that way, and it does help with communication. Like that would never have happened if I didn't say, hey, I know we can't really, I'll say this too. It's like a lot of people think we have like, well, they got this huge budget, and yes, but it is still a budget, right? So you still have to operate in that budget.
Stupid budget.
Right? And so
I just swipe the card
so
and hope nobody says anything.
Yeah, I found our associate productions director's credit card yesterday on a table. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go get some food, buy a bunch of food. But where was I on that? Oh yeah, we still have to operate under a budget, and so there's not a lot of times where I can just contract people in, or for us, everything is about culture here. So it takes at least 2 to 3 months to hire someone, just because we want to make sure that this is truly, one, what they want to do, two, that it's actually God. Like, is this the right fit for us?
Yeah, that's really wise to keep the team dynamic like that.
Yeah.
Well, as you're speaking about budget, we wanted to ask, most churches don't have the budget like Transformation does, but even you're saying like, hey, budget still creates boundaries. So like, how do you guys pull off that level of talent, that level of production value? Like, what's some base level things that churches can be doing to step up their live streams in the way that you guys are doing, in the way that we're speaking about it like it's the Super Bowl? I mean, what do you attribute that to?
With a smaller budget.
Yes, with a smaller budget.
With a smaller budget, yeah. I tell a lot of people this. It's really not about the gear. It's not about like I could go in and shoot something on an iPhone and
Told you, Blake.
Yeah,
call it
Chad.
day.
Okay, little window into the soul here. I pushed all my emotional chips in at church gear at the end of 2022 to try to get some nice video gear. And Toby and I got in a deep fight about it. There were tears, there was yelling, but I got the video gear.
I didn't cry.
Well,
That's
one of us didn't. All right, so, but that's so funny for you to say that about the iPhone.
No, an iPhone, like, it's not about the gear. It's about building the right culture, building the right team, building the right people. If you focus on your team and your health first, I found that it just creates such a dynamic way for your team to operate. And within that, it kind of goes to my whole thing, worship first, capture second, right? Because I'm building this team, because I'm building, I'm not out to build a great production team. I'm out to build a family.
Mm.
So because I'm building that, because I'm actively investing into their lives, they in turn want to do the best work that they can. They know that it's a safe place to fail. They know that if something happens, it's totally fine. It's a live environment. Mistakes are going to happen. Things are going to happen. So by creating that in turn is what actually I found replicates across the lens and actually literally, for lack of a better word, transforms people's lives on the other side of the lens, right? Because your team is invested in actually breaking that wall that's between production and what's happening in the room. And now they're actually worshiping. They're invested into what's happening, the overall goals and vision that you have. And that's a lot of it is that I spend time with the volunteers. We try as much as we can within our schedules to get, like, for instance, this Sunday, we're going to have a whole volunteer meetup right after service, go eat lunch at a restaurant down the road, things like that.
So Chad, it sounds like you're, because I know you're doing some coaching now, and it sounds like this is the exact type of stuff that you're trying to coach, young and let's call them green production guys through. Is this a lot of the, first advice that you're giving people? Like, focus on your people, build up your people, love on them. Is that where you're kind of starting with?
That's exactly what I start with. Yeah. Because it's not about the gear. Like, the gear comes secondary. Like, you're actively, you're investing in people's lives just regardless, because they're on your team, right? And then two, you are somebody that they're looking up to, especially most productions, small churches, medium-sized churches, they're kids that are actually on the media team, right? So they're looking up to you. And I hate to say it like this, but as a church production leader, director, if you got a bunch of kids and you're running it and they're running your media, you're a youth pastor. So you have to pastor these kids. They're looking up to you. So focus on them first, and after that, it'll translate. Like, just the way the Lord works. Like, after a while, you'll start to see, and there's the practical stuff, right? Show them what kind of style you want. Teach them the moves, the dynamics, how to flow, all this stuff.
And what are some of those practical things? Like, do you have any tricks up your sleeve that you love to talk about? Like, okay, if you just have the basics, here are some, ways to kind of fool your live stream audience almost to make it feel bigger.
Yeah. So there's, I'll do a few examples. Well, before I go there, the biggest thing I tell people all the time, and they look at me weird just because I'm a video director. I said, the first thing you want to do is focus on your lighting.
We've heard that.
Like, what? I go, yeah.
Yep.
You have to make the lighting good for video. So light for video first, and then the room. Sometimes that means that your room might be a little bit brighter than people would want it. But then on camera, it looks amazing, right? The second thing, it's not video, it's sound. Make sure that you have quality sound. 9 times out of 10, people will tune in online, and if the video's crappy but the audio's good, they'll stay. But if it's vice versa and the video's really good but the audio's, they'll end up tuning away. It's a subconscious thing that happens within our brains that actually wants us to, I'll go find something else. And then finally, last is video. that's when you focus on video and focus on techniques, focus on how, if it's handheld, how do you want them to do their handheld? Is it more smooth? Is it more I think the folks at Elevation once told me that I was the guerrilla warfare director because of the way I like my handheld movement.
What does that even mean?
Is it like yeah. And so it's like, is it smooth? Is it like, more handheld, kind of shaky cam-ish, right? So focusing on showing them that kind of a deal. And then the biggest thing I think, though, that a lot of people kind of don't think about or forget about is that going back to you don't have to have the best camera, the most expensive gear. It's all about how you use the gear and utilize the gear that you have. Well, I think that one of the things that, like a story, there was once we were Christmas time at Bethel, and I was newly, appointed broadcast director, managing a team, honestly, for like a big team for the first time. And I ended up giving everybody, except for one person that didn't request it off, the Christmas break. And so we come into a Sunday and I realized, like, oh my goodness, I only have one camera up. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Luckily, Drake, our production manager at the time, he used to do handheld and stuff for us too. So he's like, I'll hop on handheld. Let's lock some cameras off. And it was a cam op of ours, Jaden. She was there, so she went on our main follow cam. And so what they would do is actually, it was brilliant because we ended up getting to this dance, all the three of us. And basically, she would give me a tight shot. I'd take that shot. Then I'd go over to handheld and he'd do some movement, and I could hang on him for a little bit because he was kind of just like walking on the stage, And then, but as I'm on him, she gives me a wide shot. So then I cut to that. And then I cut off of her. She gives me another tight shot of something else. And it was just like super quick, all these bam, bam, bam. So things like that, you can actually utilize that to actually create basically like I have more than one camera and I have more than one, cam op. So
it's kind of like what I do with Blake. Like he gives me so little that I have to like make it feel larger than life. It's like I had more than one Blake. But I also feel like the moral of the story, Blake, is you don't get Christmas off anymore.
You know what, Toby?
You got to work on Christmas now.
I think that's fair since I don't work 80% of the year. I'll work Christmas.
And Chad, you're talking about gear, and you guys just launched a new video suite. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what's some of the awesome pieces that you guys are commissioning?
Yeah. So basically, we went through when I was gone, we went through like another upgrade. So we were previously shooting on Vericams, and we love them as far as the look that it gave us, that cinematic look, right? That everybody loves Vericams for. For us, because kind of going back to what we do is running it like as a tour, we're constantly moving cameras, changing positions, all this stuff. And every time we do that, we would have to repaint the cameras, rechip the cameras. Basically, for those of you that don't know, chipping cameras, painting cameras is basically setting white balance, setting all the colors, looking at a chart and making sure the color accurately matches what your eyes see and what the display see. And so we would have to do that. And that, for us, that would take us sometimes almost 2 days just to do it because we were working with, at the time, 8 cameras. And so as I was gone, they really started to, Pastor Mike was really starting to kind of push like, hey, I want us to go, what would be good in 5 to 10 years from now? What do we need to be on the cutting edge, to be ahead of the game, so to speak, right? And so my video engineer was like, honestly, if you want to go really cinematic, we've been seeing some really great stuff from Sony. And so we ended up, as I was out, they ended up basically crunching all the numbers that had to be crunched. And when I came back, they're like, hey, you're getting an upgrade. We're going to go 4K. And we got all these Sony cams. So we have a mix of F5500s for cameras. I think it's P35, Sony P35. It's something like that. And then for handhelds, it's Sony Venice cameras. And then on the switcher route of things, we basically went with Ultrix Acuities. We got a bunch of open gearboxes for HDR stuff. That's how we're doing the actual HDR portion of it. And then 2 switchers. So it's a single switcher, 2 panels, I should say. So 4 MEs total, all the geek talk. 4 MEs total. MEs 1 and 2 is basically in room. So eventually we're going to get to a spot where we want to do like a pre-service deal, where we're getting to know people that are coming, and stuff like that. And, maybe playing some games or, just kind of get them involved in some stuff. And then while that's happening, our MEs 3 and 4 is going to be doing our live broadcast where we do like a pre-show, interviews and all that stuff. So within that system, it just gives us tons of flexibility, especially for the vision that our pastor has. And like I said, we are a unique church that just so happens to have been blessed to be able to get this gear, but it's also something that we don't take lightly. We're definitely diving in head first into all of this. Like I was saying 2 weeks ago, just trainings for 2 weeks straight, just trying to learn how to use this gear properly, learn how we can utilize it for impacting the kingdom through graphics, through video, through our live stuff, Yeah.
Yeah, I bet the learning curve on that is huge. And I can feel our video listeners just geeking out right now. And Blake and I are just playing Candy Crush in our heads because we don't know video gear. Blake knows no gear. I don't know video gear. If you were talking audio gear, I'd be like, oh, I'm all in.
I mean, I want to go watch all of this work at once. I don't have to know what it is to be impressed by watching the Hive, just execute something beautiful.
Yeah, the final product is just unbelievable.
But with having all that gear, especially a lot of new gear in your setup, you're kind of setting yourself up for something to go wrong. You got all this stuff, you don't know what's happened yet, you haven't used it yet. So speaking of something when, something went wrong, tell us a disaster story you had where just something didn't cue right.
Oh man. So far it's been pretty good. Our boys at Diversified has been treating us very well. So they were there to help us if there was fires, we didn't know about it, really.
Nice.
But I'll speak into so up until last week, for 2.5 years, I was living out of a fly pack. So we had a Constellation, and we actually ended up having issues with, I think I read it in the forum once, that instead of Black Magic, it's a Black Tragic. But it does well for, the anybody that has a small to medium budget, Black Magic that's always the go-to. I always tell people go Black Magic. So basically they had some network issue with the router, or not the router, but the switcher, where with our network, it would sometimes just we'd lose the control panel. And so once during a sermon, we're going along. Yeah, go to camera 2, okay, and take camera 3, and my TD's like, I can't, and the switcher, the panel froze. I'm like, oh no, what's happening? We don't have control. And so I'm over there, and I think it was the camera that the poor CJ, because it was on his camera, and he's a handheld op, and so he's in the crowd holding this camera while we try to I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, let's try this, and then finally, on the Constellation itself, you have physical buttons on the switcher that you can take. You could switch from there. So I just ran over there. I'm like, all right, everybody's live. I can't see the multi-view, but I'm just going to hit buttons. and so I was coming to 4 and hitting 4 and okay, take. Coming to 3, hitting 3, hitting take. That was pretty stressful, I'll say. But yeah, I think the beauty of it is I have a very good relationship with our pastor, a work relationship, you know, because because I communicate to him like, hey, it's a live environment. Please know that things are going to happen,
Mm.
and when these things happen, it's out of our control. You know,
Yeah.
we're trying as much as we can throughout the week to make sure that it doesn't. But again, it's live, and bugs can persist sometimes. Even you can pop up even when you least expect it. You know, so make sure you guys have that communication with your pastor, even if you're a church producer for your church or any production director, all that stuff. Just make sure that you're having conversations, and not just surface conversations like, hey, you know, we think we're good. We think we're good, but just in case something happens, but actually just have a sit down. And also, I kind of gone a little off here, but make sure that you know your pastor's vision. Make sure that you know his vision, what he wants, because then you can actually kind of shape that your production to that. Like, okay, if he's gonna want this, let's try to make sure that this doesn't go wrong or this doesn't happen. You know, and then you can work on that throughout the week. But yeah, and if I think somebody once said like I was speaking somewhere and somebody's like, yeah, my pastor, I don't know if I'll be able to get a meeting with him to talk about what his vision is. And I was like, well, show me a pastor that doesn't want to speak about their vision.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can definitely sit down and say, hey, I just need to know what you want and how you want it to look. So that's why I kind of go into that. Like I have a good relationship with Pastor Mike in the sense that I can ask him, hey, what do you want it to look like? How is this? And then when mistakes happen, all he wants to know is it kind of goes back to before I got my emotional healing from rejection. When like what I just told you, the story I told you would have killed me before I got sick. Like I would have gone home and like, man, I'm such a failure. Something I can't believe this is happening. You know, like what did I do? I did this wrong, you know? Oh, he probably wants to fire me now. He probably, and then when they ask, hey, what happened? Then I get scared, like, oh great, I'm in big trouble, you know? When he just wants to understand, that's all. He doesn't necessarily, he doesn't want to, he's not upset. He's not gonna come down on me. It's just, hey, what happened? Oh, okay, cool. You know?
Blake, I feel like that's our relationship. I just want to know what happens. I don't want to fire you.
Oh, for real?
No, you're fired.
Me and Toby both started going to therapy around the same time. I think it fixed
Together, couples therapy, right?
Well, not together. I think it
Couples
fixed.
therapy?
It did fix a lot of things. Chad,
That's great.
something that I noticed so that you. Yeah, we hung out with some other people we really respect. I'm not going to call them out. We hung out with some people we really respected. Found out they were going to therapy. We're like, we're going to go too. And it's been good. What was I going to say? Chad, what I'm hearing you say there though that I think is so helpful and critical, like honestly throughout this whole episode, is that you can't be all that you need to be for the calling and for your pastor's vision and for the church if you yourself are not healthy. Like there's nothing to pour out if I'm not pouring everything into me. And so that morning time is important. Those boundaries are important because if you do all that, then you'll have stuff to give to your team, to give to your church.
Completely.
We wrap all our episodes on a tech takeaway, and I feel like I should have said that right before your last, like what you just said, because I felt like that was perfect. But if I could pull a second one out of you, or if you just want to expound upon that, man, we'd love to get a tech takeaway from Chad Vegas.
No, I think what you said was perfect. I've learned that you can only love others to the capacity of which you love yourself.
Ooh.
And so you have to realize that everything I do, especially in the church world, everything you do in the church world has to be out of love and compassion. Even when things go wrong, or you have a volunteer or even a fellow staff member that just rubs you the wrong way, or something's happening, I can easily go to them and, especially if they're a staff member or somebody that's, under me, and I'm like, hey, what's wrong with you? You made a mistake or all this stuff. And you've been making the same mistake like every Sunday, or I can say, hey, you're not being yourself. Let's sit down. Let's talk. What's going on? But I couldn't get to that spot until I really knew how much the Father loved me and how much I could love myself.
Mm.
And that takes work, that takes therapy, that takes time, and you have to learn how to put that in. It's just the same as working out. And I think for a good starting point, I was working out one day and I was slowly but surely ministering to one of the trainers that was there. And as I'm working out, I'm like, oh, hey, we're having this short conversation. I was like, hey, I only got like 30 minutes, so I'm going to go work out. And he's like, oh, you got 30 minutes? Let me show you some stuff. And so he showed me this workout that just completely killed me. Like I couldn't walk for like 3 days properly. I was just like, oh, I could barely walk, could barely sit. I was just dead. And,
Sounds like he had a McDonald's 5K moment, just like me.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And so he sees me like 4 days later. He's like, you're usually in here every day. I haven't seen you for 4 days. Everything okay? I'm like, yeah, you killed me. Like, he's like, what? And I go, yeah, I was in pain for, the past 4 days, just trying to recover. And he's like, what part of your body hurt? And I said, oh, it was my thighs, my legs. And he goes, okay, that's just a sign that you're from your body that's telling you what you need to work on. And immediately the Lord spoke to me and said, every time that you feel something in your heart that hurts, that's just me telling you that you need to work on that.
Mm.
So take that as a first step and find that out. Like, because it happens we're human beings. We work at a church. And a friend of mine loves to say, like, you put cows in the barn, there's going to be poop on the floor, And so it's like, it's just natural. You putting different people, different relationships, all this stuff all together, things are bound to happen and you're bound to get hurt at some point. But you can either take that hurt, stuff it inside like I used to, and completely just get like to a boiling point, right? And we're either going to explode or you're going to get sick like I did and end up hospitalized. But all that to say, make sure that you're persistent on knowing whose you are and taking time to actually work on yourself. That's been my biggest thing now. It's like, yes, it's cool that I get to play with all these crazy toys and, I got this crazy control room. But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is me coming home to a happy wife and a loving son that just is overjoyed every time he sees me, right? And to actually be at a place where I can literally like check out of all work. Like, my day's done. Now it's family. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's all I want to be with.
Chad, I think that's a message a lot of people need to hear, not just tech directors, the whole world right now. I think we're all kind of resettling post-COVID on the priorities and getting healthy ourselves so that we can be better at whatever it is, whether that's a tech director, marketing director, Candy Crush player, whatever it is. Chad, I hope you can, spread this to more people and help more people out on getting right, not just with their tech, but also with themselves. So, like, how should people reach out to you, man, after this episode?
Yeah, most of the time, Instagram, Chad Vegas. All the socials, Facebook's Chad Vegas as well. TikTok, Chad Vegas. You can see me doing my cool dances. I'm just kidding.
I got us a TikTok just because we might as well. I was, okay.
That's good. Yeah, there's a lot of, I posted a video of the control room on TikTok, and there's some spicy comments in that one.
Yeah.
So the TikTok crowd's on a whole nother level.
We had can we tell this story here, Toby? We had so we had an episode with Chad Moore on TikTok. Or like not on, like I was posting some promotional clips, and on a Friday someone comments and they're like, "Isn't that the guy that kicked his grandparents out of his house?" And I was like, "Oh man, these bots are ridiculous." I delete the comment. On Saturday, same thing. And 2 people reply this time and they're like, "What? That's sus. Where's the details?" I'm deleting them because that's what a good social media manager does on a Saturday, Toby.
Yeah.
Well, then it's Sunday and it happens a 3rd time. And I'm like, is this true? Did Chad Moore kick his grandparents out of his house?
That's funny.
I tell our 19-year-old video guy here, and he's like, "Well, have you tried Googling it, you dumb millennial?" He didn't say dumb millennial.
He thought it, though.
He thought
Right,
it.
yeah.
I Google it. There
Probably
is
should Google
someone.
it.
that kind of looks like Chad Moore that had evicted he convinced his grandparents to sign the deed of their house to him, evicted them out of their house. Him and Chad didn't look that much alike. Hey, look, same name too, actually.
I know.
But he was bald white guy. Everyone's like, that's the same funny. Chad Moore.
That's the same guy. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Yeah, it's a whole nother crowd over there.
It's a vicious place over there.
Socials. Yeah, just reach out to me on socials. I'm usually, for the most part, I'm faster to DM people on Instagram. So if you want to get a hold of me, Instagram's the way to go.
Yeah, so if you want to get a hold of Chad, reach out to him on Instagram. And if you want to accuse him of evicting his grandparents out of his house, hit him up on TikTok.
Yes.
Man, well, we appreciate you joining us today.
Oh, yeah, no, thanks for having me, guys. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Blake, can you stop pooping on the floor?
No.
I let these cows in and you just keep pooping on the floor.
You keep feeding me Mexican food and smoothies. I don't know what the heck you thought was going to happen at this point.
And I think that we should ask our audience to do either one of two things. Number one, either go to McDonald's at midnight and then tag Blake with the hashtag unhealthy decisions, or go to the gym at 5 a.m. and tag Chad with the hashtag healthy decisions.
Well, and tag me too, because honestly, it would be a healthy. Oh my gosh, I can't speak
Use
anymore.
your words. Stop pooping on the floor.
Pooping in the mic at this point. It'd be a helpful reminder for me to get to the gym. And if you do that, maybe we'll repost you. Who knows?